Di oggi, appunto, in collegamento con noi c'è Santiago che rappresenta ILAC, International Language Academy of Canada, una delle istituzioni più prestigiose e di cui ci parlerà più nel dettaglio proprio Santiago, con due sedi d'eccellenza, quindi a Toronto e a Vancouver, e vedremo più nel dettaglio quali sono i programmi che possono essere di interesse per i ragazzi che stanno finendo le superiori o che magari hanno finito la loro laurea triennale. Una breve introduzione su chi siamo, chi è Obiettivo Lingua. Noi siamo attivi da 25 anni nel settore della diffusione delle lingue straniere e ci occupiamo di vari tipi di programmi. Questa sera ci concentreremo sui programmi che abbiamo definito Gap Year, anche se il termine racchiude year, anno, non prevedono necessariamente una permanenza all'estero di un anno, ma possono essere dei programmi anche più brevi, come ad esempio solo di qualche settimana, come poi ci spiegherà Santiago quando parlerà dei micro credentials, quindi dei corsi che possono essere anche più brevi. Quindi parliamo di qualche settimana, qualche mese, un anno, oppure anche 2 o 3 anni se uno decide poi di iscriversi a un college o un'università all'estero. Come ci piace insomma rappresentare in questo grafico, si vede proprio che la formazione continua e non finisce mai, perché effettivamente in tutte le nostre fasi della vita c'è sempre qualcosa da imparare, qualche nuovo programma da scoprire. Quindi oggi ci concentreremo sui programmi Gap Year, ma vediamo che poi si ricollegano i percorsi per professionisti, i programmi genitori-figli e poi ci si ricollega ai viaggi studio per ragazzi, che probabilmente avrete già fatto, quindi esperienze di 2 settimane, collegate a loro volta a delle esperienze magari dei school e dei corsi di lingua, anche in preparazione alle certificazioni. Anche questi sono degli altri programmi che effettivamente possono essere di interesse per chi appunto finisce le superiori e vuole effettivamente esplorare un pochino il mondo e migliorare comunque anche il proprio curriculum e la propria professionalità. Come certificati e accreditamenti, molto velocemente, noi siamo accreditati ISO 9001 e UNIN 14804, che sono le 2 certificazioni più prestigiose nel settore, ed è possibile pagare con la carta del docente e con le carte della cultura e del merito. Adesso, sempre una breve panoramica molto rapida su che cos'è il Gap Year e che cosa intendiamo con questo termine ombrello. Quindi come termine Gap Year abbiamo deciso di racchiudere tutta una serie di programmi che poi vedremo più nel dettaglio. L'idea è quello di dare un po' un'offerta mirata per i ragazzi, soprattutto quelli di quarta e di quinta superiore, che magari finiscono le scuole e dicono e adesso cosa devo fare? Magari l'università può essere una scelta interessante per la maggior parte delle persone, ma non per tutti, o magari non subito. Questo perché effettivamente è importante capire qual è il programma giusto per ognuno di noi in un preciso momento, in una precisa fase della nostra vita. Per cui se voi siete in quarta, in quinta superiore e ancora non avete bene le idee chiare su che cosa volete fare nella vita, qual è il percorso di studi che vi interessa o semplicemente anche non volete effettivamente fare l'università perché siete stanchi di studiare, allora partecipare a questi webinar o comunque considerare i programmi che abbiamo definito come Gap Year può essere interessante per trovare delle alternative. Questo perché magari uno può prendersi anche semplicemente qualche settimana, qualche mese di tempo per poi tornare anche in Italia con le idee più chiare, capire meglio qual è il proprio posto nel mondo, chi siamo anche noi come persone, che cosa ci piacerebbe fare nella vita. È che molto spesso finché non si prova non lo sa. E l'idea di questi programmi è proprio quello di darvi la possibilità di fare diverse esperienze, di sperimentare per capire voi stessi quali sono effettivamente i vostri interessi, per poi prendere una decisione più consapevole. Super brevemente di nuovo la storia del Gap Year. Il Gap Year è nato insomma negli anni 60, quindi dopo la seconda guerra mondiale, e l'idea qual era? Era proprio quello di introdurre uno scambio culturale tra i vari paesi per prevenire future guerre. Perché? Perché l'idea è che viaggiando, scoprendo culture diverse, si evitano i conflitti, quindi si aumenta la propria comprensione del mondo e anche la propria comprensione di noi stessi. I programmi Gap Year in breve, come possiamo insomma strutturare ecco, il nostro percorso finite le scuole superiori o anche finita la triennale? Abbiamo elencato qui una serie di programmi che possono essere di interesse, quindi può essere un corso di lingua con una certificazione, per cui uno finito le superiori dice ok, prima di iniziare l'università voglio fare determinate settimane per lavorare proprio sulle mie competenze linguistiche e alla fine del mio percorso prendere una certificazione linguistica internazionale che poi possa essere anche riconosciuta dalla mia università. Come seconda opzione possiamo valutare dei percorsi di tirocinio o di volontariato all'estero. Adesso poi nella nostra presentazione vedremo un attimino in Canada che cosa è possibile fare, perché effettivamente siamo fuori dall'Unione Europea, per cui è necessario avere il visto, però effettivamente è possibile anche fare dei tirocini e delle esperienze lavorative partecipando a dei programmi, dei certificate o dei diploma. Dopo lo vedremo più nel dettaglio. Una terza opzione sono dei professional certificates che ILAC ha chiamato micro credentials o nano credentials, ovvero sono dei corsi più brevi, parliamo di 4, 6 o 8 settimane, in cui ci si concentra su un particolare argomento. Quindi non sono dei corsi di lingua inglese, ma sono dei corsi a livello universitario, a livello di higher education, in cui si studia un determinato argomento che può essere il marketing, il digital marketing, project management, e quindi possono essere interessanti per chi vuole fare un'esperienza all'estero, ha già un buon livello linguistico e quindi non vuole fare un corso di lingua e al tempo stesso è incuriosito da una determinata materia. Per cui fare un corso di questo genere, anche molto breve, può essere molto interessante per poi effettivamente capire se quello è un percorso universitario che può essere di interesse. Quindi sono un pochino dei taster, degli assaggi che ci permettono di capire se effettivamente un determinato argomento è come ce lo aspettiamo, fa per noi, se effettivamente ci interessa. Come quarto punto abbiamo i percorsi pathway, sono dei percorsi pensati proprio per preparare i ragazzi, gli studenti alla missione diretta all'università. In questi corsi si lavora sia sulla lingua, quindi lavorando sulla lingua inglese, ma non sull'inglese a 360 gradi, quindi improntato sulla comunicazione pratica, ma proprio sulle competenze più accademiche. Quindi si lavora sull'inglese accademico, quindi si impara effettivamente a fare delle ricerche in modo autonomo, studiare su testi complessi, fare report, scrivere dei saggi, perché poi hanno determinati requisiti anche su come scrivere dei saggi, come fare delle citazioni, come fare delle presentazioni. Quindi non è solamente un corso di lingua, ma ci si prepara proprio allo studio a livello universitario. ILAC poi ha un programma molto affascinante, a mio avviso, che chiamano proprio programma Gap Year, ovvero 6 mesi, ecco, un semestre accademico di corso di inglese accademico e poi un altro semestre invece di corsi universitari attraverso le loro università e i loro college partner. Per cui effettivamente si sta in Canada un anno, si lavora sulla lingua e al tempo stesso si ha l'occasione di frequentare un'università in Canada, di scegliere dei corsi e di scoprire se effettivamente quella è la strada giusta per noi. Se poi si decide anche di rientrare, è comunque un'esperienza decisamente significativa, sia da un punto di vista professionale, perché si è vissuto comunque all'estero per un periodo considerevole, sia da un punto di vista accademico. Come ultimo punto abbiamo la possibilità di iscriversi direttamente in un'università oppure in un college all'estero. Vedremo che in Canada ci sono università e college e che non sono proprio la stessa cosa. Noi magari usiamo i due termini come sinonimi, ma in realtà sono diversi e adesso Santiago nella sua presentazione magari ci spiegherà più nel dettaglio in cosa consiste questa differenza. Adesso passeremo all'inglese, per cui Santiago avrà la sua presentazione, poi avrete l'opportunità comunque di fare delle domande, di parlare, chiederò anch'io varie cose a Santiago, quindi senza problemi in italiano e in inglese ci siamo. Ok, now I stop sharing my screen and it's up to you, Santi. So thank you for being here, for joining us in our webinar. I've just given a short introduction of all the programs that ILAC offer, a very general introduction. So now you can go more in detail and tell us as many things as you want about ILAC, all the programs and everything that a student can do in Canada when they finish high school.
Thank you so much, Giulia. Thank you for that amazing introduction. My Italian level is quite low. I am Spanish from Spain, so I catch, as you might catch Spanish. but not all the introduction, but I understand mostly. So thank you. Thank you also the Obiettivo Lingua team for making this webinar, for introducing to all the students the opportunity in Canada. Okay. I'm going to share my screen and we will start with the presentation. It's a short presentation about Canada. Can you see my screen?
We can see the micro-credential screen.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So this is the first slide.
Yeah. Okay, great. So now you can see my first slide, correct, Julia?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me
Yes,
as
we
well,
can
right?
see it. Thanks.
Okay. Well, so again, thank you, Obiettivo Lingua, for organizing. I am Santi. I represent ILAC Education Group. This is the largest, one of the largest private education groups in Canada, which help with private and public courses in this nation. I'm going to introduce myself briefly as a manager for the European market in the ILAC Education Group. I am in Toronto today, and I live here in Toronto. In the picture background, you will see Toronto on the left and Vancouver on the right. Is a mix of the two cities, two biggest cities in Canada. Today is a very special Monday because we have a full eclipse coming through Toronto in just a few hours, and everybody's expecting to see how it will look. Toronto is a very big city. It's a 3.5 million people city, which 2.8 million residents in downtown core. It's one of the most livable and competitive cities in the world. It's growing very, very much. I've seen the picture you had in the presentation, Julia, and actually the first picture you had there, it's the beautiful Shangri-La Hotel with the background of the CN Tower. All that avenue, it's now under construction, having hundreds of new units for residents and offices. So it's really, really growing as a destination for visitors, but also for companies. You can see the global firms that are having their main offices here in Toronto, and every time more and more, especially from the IT sector. Okay. Vancouver is ranked the third most livable place in the world. It's a very small city, if you want to call it. It's almost a million people city. It's beside a fantastic, phenomenal public open space that are the Rocky Mountains. And you can visit different small villages where are in the mountains, enjoy the weather in summer with very soft winter as well. And you have also Whistler very close, which is a fantastic place for skiing. Okay. So Canada as a country is huge, is very big. In between Rome and Toronto is almost the same distance than in between Toronto and Vancouver. So it's a very large country with very different um, sites to see. Okay. Um, ILAC Education Group, it's a group that gets different types of education. So we have offers for from 7 years old up until 65 years old. So there is different types of education for everyone, from an English school to different things. I'm going to just show to you the different companies that the group represents. So for the language education, we have ILAC English School, Tambut, which is another of our brands, Language Center. And then we also have ILAC Keys, which is online courses. So if any of you are willing to develop English skills online, we have a fantastic online program that is with students worldwide and with different timelines. Okay, then we also have programs of study work, which are under our private career colleges, which is ILAC International College and Tambut Careers. I'm going to just briefly explain about the education in Canada so you get to know more. Do you have any questions so far? Maybe Julia or anyone in the chat?
So far, so good. It made me laugh to define Vancouver a small city of only 1 million people, but that's
Yeah,
the truth about cities in North America, both in the US and in Canada. Then in the presentation, there's also a huge, well, a map of Canada, and it's really interesting to see how big it is, because if we are not familiar with the destination, we can't really imagine a country this huge. But
yeah,
anyway,
correct. It is true. So just so you know, uh, for me, I am from Santiago de Compostela, and for me to drive all the way to Germany takes around 10 hours. That's almost crossing entire Europe, right? Like if I go to the north of Germany, and just in my province here in Ontario, to cross the entire province to the next province, it takes you driving around 14 hours, and that's one of the 10 provinces. So just so you know how big it is, and really, yeah, like the city of Toronto, it's massive. It's like kind of a mini New York, just more modern and probably a bit more clean. but
yeah.
but yeah, like Vancouver is more wild. It's just a city that has everything. Has the beach very close, but has the mountains also. So I'm happy that made you laugh, but yeah, I hope that many students can come and enjoy it. So I'm going to follow presenting to you a little bit the difference in between the public and the private education sectors in Canada. So first of all, I want to just give you an introduction about what is a college and what is a university. When we talk about colleges in Europe, sometimes we get confused because in the UK, there were some institutions where they start calling their secondary schools colleges as well. So sometimes we believe is for younger students, but it is not in Canada. The college system was created in the 1960s, and it was called community college. And what it was is basically because the country is so big, they needed to develop skills for small populations all around, and they create this called community college to train people on practical skills to be able to bring new employees to the market. That's how the college began in Canada. So colleges, generally speaking, are much more practical than universities. However, there is another big difference in between the private and public. Okay, when we talk about public universities or private universities, they're usually much more academic and much longer courses than the colleges as well. Okay, what you see on the screen is a brief description of the main difference that I find personally in between the public and private colleges. So the public colleges or universities usually have very big classrooms, usually 30, 40, 50, even 60 students in one classroom. The public colleges or universities also have what we call a differentiator in the fees. So they have domestic fees and international fees. They are by law forced to have a low fee for the national students, which usually is 3 times less than for the international. So if you want to study in Canada in a public college, let's say you're going to pay, I don't know, $30,000 a year, but I am, as a resident of Canada, will actually pay one third of that, which would be 10,000. Just to put an example there, okay? The public and the public colleges and universities are very academic focused in compare with the private. The public, especially the colleges, are more practical but academic still. However, the private are less academic, more focused on the practical side of the jobs. Okay, the English requirements for the public colleges, and because it's more academic, are much higher. So they usually require to have a high score in IELTS or a very good communicative skills to be able to follow the class. Private colleges or universities offer a completely different range of level entry requirements depending on the college. Okay, but just so you know, the private colleges will have options for a V1 student level of English. The class average size of a private college is in between 18 to 20 students. And of course, they have a much better price than the public ones. I know this is completely opposite to what the Italian students are used to, but that's because the private here, it's allowed to discount to bring diversity, to bring different markets to the classrooms. Okay. Um, do you have any questions so far about
Yeah,
what I?
yes, Santi. And what about the programs offered? Are they the same programs for in colleges and universities, or are there different programs, different length also? Because I know that in colleges there are also shorter programs rather than a full degree.
Correct. So colleges usually range because they are more practicum, so they always have a practicum component on it. Colleges usually offer like the shortest college program you can get is 6 months, and they usually go from 6 months to 2 years in the private colleges, and usually in the public colleges they go the minimum is 1 year, and they go up to usually 3 years. Okay, it really depends on the college. When we talk about one college, it can have more than 500 to 600 different topics to choose from. So you can do engineering, but you also can do marketing and sales. So it's a very different in the public ones. Private, they are more niche. They try to go to the companies, find out what they are looking for as an employee. So they let's say that you Obiettivo Lingua is here in Toronto. So the private college of Tambut, for instance, probably will talk to you and say, okay, what do you usually need in your company? So maybe you tell them, well, I need a very good communicative person that speaks fluent Italian and English, and I need them to be able to present. So then the private college will design a course that will provide the skills that you as a industry leader need from those students. That's what the private college usually does. And most of those college programs are basically driven by the industry. So if the industry needs people in certain thing, we train them and we try to bring them to the jobs. Okay, from the private ones. The public ones are depending on which sector. They actually are more academic, so they're gonna have a longer term of study, and usually their terms of practicum are a bit shortened than in the private colleges. It really varies depending on what you do. Under ILAC education group, we have both public and private. We try to fit the best interest of the student. So if there is a student that is willing to do um, uh, development in English, so be bilingual fully, and at the same time wants to work to make some money, we will probably recommend a private college because it's going to require lower English level and it's going to let them work the entire time while they are in Canada. If we have a student that is willing to do something more specific, more niche, so I don't know, something related to specialty studies on childhood education. So then we're going to look at our public colleges and find options. In Canada, we represent more than 100 different colleges and universities. If
Excuse
you
me,
see,
Santi. Can you
yep,
please go back to the other slide? Because I
yep,
want to
sure.
be sure that it's clear. So we'll briefly switch into Italian just to make sure that it's clear the difference between
Yep.
universities and colleges. Ok, quindi giusto per riassumere, ecco questa slide che secondo me è molto importante perché noi tendiamo a usare college e università come sinonimi, ma in realtà non lo sono. Quindi il college ha un approccio più pratico rispetto all'università e cambiano anche i tipi di corsi che vengono offerti. I college, siano essi pubblici o privati, offrono dei corsi che sono anche più brevi rispetto alla laurea. La laurea può essere appunto come da noi di 3 o di 4 anni e viene erogata principalmente dalle università. I college possono offrire anche loro dei percorsi di laurea, ma offrono anche dei programmi più brevi che sono chiamati certificate, se durano fino a 1 anno, 6 mesi, 1 anno, oppure diploma che possono durare 2 o 3 anni. Santiago ha evidenziato un pochino le differenze tra i college e università pubblici e privati, questo perché noi siamo abituati a pensare a una scuola, insomma un'università privata, come più costosa rispetto a un'università pubblica. Nel caso del Canada invece è diverso, perché le università e i college pubblici effettivamente hanno dei prezzi che sono stabiliti e per gli studenti italiani si applicano le international fees, quindi le tasse internazionali che sono, come diceva Santiago, 3 volte più costose rispetto ai costi di tuition per i locali, per gli studenti canadesi. Il prezzo mediamente poi varia, però è di $30.000 l'anno, per cui effettivamente è molto di più rispetto a quello a cui siamo abituati noi qui in Italia, ecco. Per quanto riguarda invece i college e anche alcune università private, invece possono scegliere loro, hanno la libertà di stabilire i prezzi e possono quindi applicare delle borse di studio, degli sconti proprio per una determinata nazionalità, per favorire un pochino la diversità, per creare insomma un ambiente più internazionale. Questo giusto per puntualizzare gli aspetti più importanti. L'altra differenza riguarda i requisiti di ammissione, che magari approfondiremo, beh, possiamo chiederli già adesso quando finiamo, perché effettivamente i college e le università pubbliche richiedono dei livelli anche di inglese, dei requisiti di ammissione molto alti, invece le università e i college privati hanno dei requisiti che solitamente sono un pochino più bassi, un pochino più accessibili. E quindi dipende un pochino dal tipo di professione che una persona cerca, per cui se si vuole avere una competenza più di tipo accademico, i corsi universitari sono quelli che sono più adatti a noi. Invece i college offrono dei corsi che sono proprio molto molto più specialistici, sono orientati alla preparazione per un lavoro, sono molto professionalizzanti, per questo sono anche di durata più breve, perché il contenuto dei corsi, i corsi che vengono erogati dai college sono stabiliti guardando le necessità delle aziende. Per cui, ok, le aziende hanno bisogno di figure che lavorino nell'IT, quindi nella tecnologia e quant'altro. Perfetto, i college allora organizzano dei corsi che sono estremamente professionalizzanti per preparare le figure professionali che sono necessarie nel mondo del lavoro in quel preciso momento. Per cui c'è un fortissimo legame tra college e mondo del lavoro. Per questo poi anche il tasso di occupabilità finito il college è veramente molto, molto, molto alto. Right, Santi? I was telling our guests that the courses in college are very aimed at preparing professional figures, and so the percentage of employability after the end of a certificate and a diploma is very high. I mean, I read a very high percentage, like 85% of students with a college degree, with a certificate or a diploma, find a job within 6 months by the end of their study. Is
Correct.
that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, it's correct. So there are two things that are very different with the Italian or European market. The first thing is that the system of education in Canada goes constantly to the companies to see what they need. So it's not attached to just the theorics, like the main things that you study in the class. It's also attached to what the company needs. Okay, so that's the first thing that especially colleges do. Just as an example for you to know, in one of our public colleges, it's called Niagara College. I went to visit them, and they had a program that is just to take care of bees. It looks crazy when I went there because I thought, why would you have a program to learn how to take care of bees, right? But it is actually one of the high demand employability mobility programs, because what happens is that the bees, we usually think about them to create honey, but in this case, they are needed to pollinize entire crops, about apples, cherry trees, many other things. And especially in Kelowna Valley, which is entire valley in Vancouver or in California as well, because they have these huge valleys, they need people who learn and know how to use those bees to pollinize entire valleys. Okay, that I always put it there as an example of very practical um, college. What they try to do is they learn what the industry needs and they train you for it so that the industry needs you. Okay, so that's why it's very employable, because they are actually looking to know what the market needs, right? On the other hand, it's the labor market in Canada is very strong compared to Europe. So I don't know what's the unemployment rate right now in Italy, but here in general, it's around 5% the unemployment rate. It goes to 7% unemployment rate when we talk about youth, but generally speaking, it's around 5%. We had 4.8%, the lowest in, I believe, last year, October or something like that. So it's really those two things, right? Like the public colleges prepares you very well for the jobs, and also the market is very good for those possible new employees. One more thing that you were telling, and that's very important, is that the college system in Canada helps the market as well as the student. And for that, it also prepares you in your English skills. So the programs are duration are depending on how long is your visa. So public colleges have the opportunity to immigrate easily than private colleges. So if your goal is to immigrate to Canada, the best steps to do is to do private college to develop your English skills and know the city where you're going to stay at for 6 months to 1 year, and then jump to a public college program where it's going to allow you to stay the entire time study work, and then you can apply to work one entire year in Canada. It really depends of each student, but more or less that's the general.
Well, talking about working, how is it possible to work in Canada with a visa student or while studying at a college or at a university? I know that because of this, strong connection between companies and colleges, the students studying at college must also do some work experience to be ready for the job market. How is it possible?
Yeah. So to come and study, there are two ways in Canada for Italians, for Europeans. So one way it's very simple. You do not need anything else than your passport, and you can apply for one ETA. That it's an online document that you get like 2 days before you come. Okay, that's a very simple way, and that's for programs that allows you to stay in Canada for up to 6 months. When you do one of those programs, usually it's English or it's micro credentials, you are not allowed to work. Okay. However, if you do a program under one of the ILAC higher education courses, either public, private, any of them, you would be allowed to ask for a visa. It takes like 4 to 6 weeks to get all the documents sorted. And when you get your visa, you can study and work during the entire program. And then when you finish your program, you also have what we call co-op, which is a practicum paid. That co-op usually allows you to work full time. Does it help you with the explanation? Would you like me to
Yes,
give you
indeed.
more?
I can translate it in Italian just briefly.
Yeah,
Quindi
sure.
noi gli europei, insomma noi italiani abbiamo la possibilità di viaggiare in Canada utilizzando l'ETA che costa $14, si fa online come l'ESTA, ecco, per andare negli Stati Uniti. e si può stare in Canada fino a 6 mesi. In quel caso, con quel tipo di visto, non è possibile lavorare mentre si è in Canada. Per frequentare dei programmi che durino più di 6 mesi, allora bisogna fare il visto studente, quindi è tutta quanta un'altra pratica, però effettivamente si ha la possibilità di lavorare part-time mentre si studia, ma proprio come percorso curricolare in molti programmi, sia dei college ma anche di molte università, c'è una parte, un semestre solitamente che viene definito come co-op. Quindi co-op, l'ho scritto poi nei commenti, è proprio un tirocinio full time, solitamente può essere retribuito o non retribuito, però l'idea è quella di fare proprio un'esperienza lavorativa, professionalizzante nel settore in cui si sta studiando. Per cui se si sceglie di studiare per diventare igienisti dentali, per fare solo un esempio, allora il co-op deve essere comunque un tirocinio fatto nel settore dei propri studi. Il lavoro invece part-time che si può fare mentre si studia invece può essere libero, però è comunque un ottimo modo per ammortizzare un pochino i costi e riuscire comunque a guadagnare qualcosa mentre si studia in Canada. Poi quando ci si iscrive, ecco, in un college o in un'università, poi si ha anche la possibilità di avere l'estensione, insomma, del proprio visto lavorativo anche per qualche anno, lì dipende dalla durata del proprio programma, però si ha la possibilità anche di lavorare al termine del proprio percorso di studi. Ok, well, thank you, Santi. I think
Thank you.
this is
Thank
very
you.
interesting to know that it's also possible to work in Canada because it's not, well, for us, for Europeans, it sounds a bit obvious, but it's not obvious when you go out of Europe. So it's important to know that there's a way, and it's a very interesting way because when you finish your diploma, your certificate, you already have a certain experience in the work field you are studying in.
Correct. And it's very important for students too. I came to Canada 12 years ago, and yes, I needed to work to maintain, right? To spend money on rent, on food. So it's something that Canada gives you the access to, and is very important, very important. I'm just gonna follow with the next slide. In the next slide, you can see the Canadian map, okay? So from left to right, we have 10 divisions, and on the top, we have another 3. The 10 below are called the provinces. So Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories in the north. Most of the population live in the 10 provinces. The most populated provinces are the one in the very left of your screen with green small numbers. That is British Columbia. That's the farthest from Italy. And then the one with the red small dots, it's Ontario, okay, where the city of Toronto is, where I am. Those two are the biggest, the most famous provinces and the biggest in numbers because of the city of Toronto in Ontario and the city of Vancouver in British Columbia. So each of those little points that you see in the map are institutions that are partnered with us and that we represent. So they can be either universities or colleges. So if you are interested in doing something, you just need to tell our team what type of studies you would like to do, what's your English level, and for how long you would like to do it. So we will try to find you options. Okay, so Obiettivo Lingua will filter all that information and help you to guide, and we will provide you with the different opportunities in Canada. Questions, Julia, on this
Yes.
slide?
I think that when thinking about Canada, the question is it very cold there? Is there
Yeah,
always snow or is it like a livable place?
that's a good question. As you see, the country is very, very big. So the vast majority of the country is wildness. Nobody lives. It's very, very wild. But most of the population lives, actually 90% of the population lives in a ratio that is no more than 100 kilometers from the border with the United States. That's where most of the cities are. There is a big difference in between the west and the east. So if you go to Vancouver, in Vancouver City, you will have never or only few times the snow. It's a very green paradise, a lot of trees and a lot of mountains. And you have snow in the top of the mountains and in the range of the mountains, but not in the city. The average temperature year round is around 14, 15 degrees. They have a very warm summer with like 27 to 30 degrees, and a very mild winter with maybe the coldest it gets is like 8 degrees. Okay. However, if we talk about Toronto, then we have more storms coming and more snow. Um, Toronto can get very cold in winter, however, very hot in summer. Summers will be like here in Toronto around 34, 35 degrees many days, and winter will average in the winter months of December, January, and February like -3, -5, -6. Well, there is several days during the storms that we can reach very low temperatures, but Toronto has that type of climate that a storm comes for 3 days and goes. Okay, uh, do we live with the penguins? No, there is no penguins in Toronto unless you go to the zoo, and it's a very livable city. Also, is ready for the snow. Toronto downtown has almost 30 kilometers of path, which are streets that go under. So if you want to go to a Starbucks, you have it upstairs and downstairs.
Okay, well, thank you. I can confirm every word because I went to Canada and I can confirm it wasn't so cold. No, well, actually, I found it the weather much colder here near Venice than there because the humidity,
Well,
l'umidità, come si
well,
dice.
what's the temperature right now there?
Well, now it's rather warm. I think they're 18, no, more, 23
18, 20.
maybe degrees. So it's still very warm, but in winter it can be colder, like more or
So
less like Vancouver.
today here in Toronto, we have right now 9 degrees. It's going to be 12. Yesterday it was very sunny and we had like
Hmm.
14 degrees. So you have an
Okay.
idea of comparing, right?
Hmm.
So it's not that cold. It's just that when a storm comes, it gets very cold, but it goes away. So last week we had few days of very cold winter, like weather. 2 weeks ago we had like 2 or 3 days of 18 degrees.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it
it's
really
very
varies.
unpredictable. But
Yeah.
anyway, so Canada is very similar to the northern part of the United States, to New York State is really next to Ontario. So there isn't much of a difference. Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
yeah.
Just a brief geographical session for us.
Yeah. Yeah, from Toronto, you can visit many wonderful places. You can go to the Niagara Falls, which is 1 hour and a half away. You can go to Ottawa or to Montreal, which you have 1 hour and a half flights. You also can visit United States, of course. Like from here, there is a flight of 1 hour and a half to Chicago. More or less in 1 to 2 hours, you have Chicago, Washington, and also New York City, of course. So living in Toronto, it's very nice because it's clean. It's of course Canada has a public health system. So like in Europe, you don't pay for health care. The hospitals are for free, and also like in Europe, the guns are prohibited. So you cannot carry a gun in Canada. While in the United States, depending on the state, yes, you can. So there are big differences in between those two countries, Canada and the United States. But yeah, regarding the weather, as you said, regarding the education, because we have lots of colleges and universities through our team, and with the help of you guys, we can guide and find which studies you can do best and what's the most recommended. Usually, I would recommend to start by developing your English skills. This is my last slide. I don't want to bore you guys. I'm sorry that it takes a little bit of time to explain those little details. But when you want to develop English, usually in Europe, they teach you a lot of grammar and vocabulary. That's why we recommend very much this type of micro credentials, because the micro credentials help you to really speak English, to be bilingual. So it's good to learn and to be taught the grammar and vocabulary part of the language because it's the fundamental part. But when you already have like a V1 level, it's very good to mix those English classes with micro credential courses, which are some of the ones you have in the screen. So a cross-cultural communication or a leadership class or maybe a digital marketing class, something that'll help you to talk in English about something specific. So this is something that I recommend very much when you want to be bilingual and you want to also develop quick English skills. Julia, I don't know if you have questions about this, maybe?
Well, I just want to add something because I think that the micro credentials can be very useful because you can both learn the content of a certain topic, like for instance, the sales fundamentals can teach you like the basics, the fundamentals of sales. So you get really useful information for when you will start working in any working field, because it's like a general knowledge that can be used in any kind of work, in any kind of job that you're going to take. And at the same time, you're also learning the micro language, the microlingua, which is the specific vocabulary
Yeah,
used in a certain working field. So if I work in a specific sector, I need a certain number of specific words. And this kind of courses are really useful because when you start maybe working in a specific working field, or if you want to take a university course, then you already have the background knowledge of the idioms, the words, and also the kind of grammar needed for that specific working field.
correct.
Quindi
Yeah.
in italiano brevemente questi corsi effettivamente tornano utili perché sia vi permettono di acquisire delle competenze generali di un specifico settore, quindi vi permettono di capire se vi piace, se non vi piace, se fa per voi, ma anche vi permettono di acquisire un bagaglio di conoscenze che poi possono essere veramente molto spendibili nel mondo del lavoro, a prescindere poi dal settore specifico in cui andrete a lavorare. Perché, di nuovo, prendendo l'esempio di Sales Fundamentals, se poi andate a lavorare in un negozio di scarpe piuttosto che nella distribuzione di un supermercato, in un negozio di abbigliamento o anche in un'agenzia di viaggi come la nostra che vende servizi, comunque vi servono, sono delle competenze trasversali. E facendo questi corsi poi voi imparate anche il lessico specifico, la microlingua che vi serve per un determinato settore lavorativo o che vi servirà anche se poi decidete di approfondire questo argomento iscrivendovi magari a un certificate, a un diploma oppure a un corso universitario. Per cui come primo approccio sono veramente molto interessanti e come vedete la durata è molto breve. 4, 6, 8 settimane proprio per rompere il ghiaccio e acquisire comunque delle competenze importanti e anche far figurare un tipo di esperienza molto rilevante nel curriculum. Ok, that's all for the Italian part.
Good. So yeah, that would be all. And again, like if you have questions, it would be great that now you bring it up. We have different people in the call that maybe have questions about the cities, about maybe the education system here. Maybe they want to know about the different colleges or universities, how they operate, where are they located, or maybe I have Italian questions for you, Julia, instead of in English. So if you guys want to say something or write something in the chat, we will have now a few minutes.
We can wait for some questions. Then if we have some time, so I think it would be also interesting to learn a little bit more about the Gap Year program, the 6 months of academic English and the 6 months of university colleges, because that program can be very useful for a student who still doesn't have an idea of what kind of university degree they're going to take, which kind of topics are of interest. So we can have some times for the questions if they have some. Otherwise, maybe we can
Yeah, I can start
talk about that.
explaining about the gap year, and if
Thank
they have questions, they write in the chat. The gap year experience is built for excellence academic, which means that you develop skills that nobody has. In your introduction, you explain how the gap year began, how it was built, and why. It's a very interesting description because the reality is that when I meet people from all around the world, especially students from Europe, you see big difference in between the north of Europe and the south of Europe. And that's basically because of the education system. So in the north of Europe, Switzerland and Germany especially, they do a lot of times gap years. In the south of Europe, they don't. And many times is a cultural thing because the translation, I don't know to Italian, but from the Spanish translation, I noticed that gap year means año sabático, which is like year of doing nothing. And the translation is very bad because actually the gap year is not doing nothing, it's actually doing a lot. And the way it's composed is that the first term of the program, which usually is 4 months, 4 to 6 months, depending, they develop English. So they learn how to create big essays for the universities and how to write and speak in public presentations. Like they learn those skills. It's more than grammar and vocabulary. It's just learning about how to be in a university class in English. Okay. During the second part, they can choose between 3 to 5 different subjects in one of our universities or colleges partners. That's fantastic because what happens sometimes is that you want to do something about arts, but your mom is an engineer and your father is a doctor. And your father wants you to be a doctor, and your mom wants you to be an engineer, but you want to be an artist. So Gap Year is fantastic to really show your parents what you are good at because you can choose out of those 3 to 5 subjects, you can choose one of each. So you can choose, let's say, 2 from science, which will be very happy for your father, and another 2 from the side of arts, which is going to be make very happy the student, and then you can choose one more for something related to engineering. So then when you do those subjects, you're going to develop skills on it, and you're going to show your parents, say like, listen, I'm very good doing arts. Look, I got 10 out of 10. But Papi, I'm not as good doing maybe engineering and science. So, like it's a way of proving to yourself if you are good or not, and if you want to do that or not. So Gap Year is a fantastic experience. It's growing in the south of Europe, especially Italy and Spain and the south of France are getting into it more and more. It's just a matter of changing a little bit the view of the parents, which decide sometimes, no, no, you're going to do this or that.
Yes, indeed. We noticed that still in Italy, as you said, anno sabbatico is generally considered a wasted year of doing nothing. But if you want to take a gap year, you can't just be a couch potato and sit on your sofa all day long. You have to take that opportunity to travel the world and experience and also test yourself, your aptitude, what you want to be and who you want to be and who you are at the same time. So we have seen in this presentation that in Canada, there are really many opportunities, both for short stays of just 4, 6, or 8 weeks, or longer experiences, if you also want to join a college or a university program, which can last 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, or a full degree course, which is 3 or 4 years. But still there are many opportunities and it's possible to personalize it according to your interests and also your needs. So, well, I would say thank you very much for that, Santi, for your presentation. It was very useful and interesting. And now back to Italian. Quindi se avete qualche curiosità, qualche domanda, volete approfondire dei programmi, io ci sono Giulia. Adesso condividerò lo schermo brevemente con i miei contatti, così potete effettivamente vederli. Allora, ecco qua, questa qui è la mia mail diretta, giulia@obiettivolingua.it, per cui se avete piacere mi potete scrivere una mail oppure fare un colpo di telefono, così possiamo parlarci un pochino più di persona senza che ci siano altre persone che ascoltano durante la registrazione, così poi possiamo un attimino capire quali sono i programmi più di interesse per ognuno, perché poi ogni persona è un modo a parte con diverse aspettative, diverse necessità, per cui il nostro compito è proprio quello di aiutarvi a trovare un po' il vostro percorso. Ecco qua. Ok, so thank you again. Grazie mille di esservi collegati, di essere stati con noi per tutto questo tempo. È stata una presentazione abbastanza lunga, speriamo che sia stata comunque interessante e utile per voi. Thank you again, Santi.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you everyone for attending. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.